So at this point, you should have a little bit of knowledge about photosynthesis and the light reactions. So we're going to go through these notes, but kind of at a quicker pace because it should be reviewed at this point. So first of all, we know that the sun plays a major role, and so every living thing is going to be dependent on the sun. If it is something that is photosynthetic, it's going to get its energy from the sun. And then if it's something that's a carnivore or an herbivore, either one, it's going to have to eat something that gets its energy from the sun. So we really can't survive without the sun. So autotrophs are the organisms that get all of their energy from the sunlight, and they use that to end up making sugar. So the photosynthesis, the process that we're looking at here, turning that light energy into sugar, producing oxygen, and seeing how all of that comes together in a chemical process. Heterotrophs are going to get their food from those autotrophs or some other source rather than the sunlight. Then we have what's called a biochemical pathway. So this is going to be chemical reactions that are linked so that the product of one reaction is going to be used as the reactant in the other. And so, for example, photosynthesis, we're going to start out with the sunlight and carbon dioxide. Then it's going to produce oxygen and sugar, which, for example, if you have a little chihuahua here, he needs oxygen and sugar. We need oxygen and sugar to survive. And then we're going to process that in a chemical reaction and make the carbon dioxide for the plants. And so that's just going to be one continuous cycle or a biochemical pathway. So the light reactions is going to be the first step, and we've looked a little bit about that so far as you guys have done your options that you've done the last couple days. And so this light is going to end up giving us ATP energy and another energy source called NADPH. And then the second part of photosynthesis is called the Calvin cycle, and that's going to be in the next section. But here's where we're going to end up using that carbon dioxide, making more energy, and making those sugar molecules. So the photosynthesis equation, and you do need to know this, you don't necessarily have to know the molecules, but you would at least need to know the words. So we're going to have carbon dioxide, or CO2, combining with water and light energy to make glucose and oxygen. Now these numbers here, those are to balance the equation, which is something we'll learn about in chemistry. So I'm not so worried about you knowing the numbers as the reactants and products. So the reactants, carbon dioxide and water and light, are going to produce the products, glucose and oxygen. That's very important that you know that. And so the main part of this test, we're going to focus on, can you tell me this stuff? Can you tell me, looking at the reactants, where it's used in the process? And for the products, can you tell me where they're produced in the process? So here's some cute little flowers. No, you may not be excused. You're not leaving this dinner table until you've finished photosynthesizing. So we need to start off looking at chloroplasts. So chloroplasts are located in the cell. Plants, algae, they're going to have these, and they're going to be located inside, and they have a double membrane. So if we look at this, it kind of looks like a pancake with lots of little stacks of pancakes in there, but we've got two membranes that are going to cover that. Within that chloroplast, we've got the thylakoids and a stack of thylakoids. You can see here the whole stack is called the granum. And within those thylakoids, the membranes of those are where the magic's going to happen. So you can kind of keep that in your mind. The stroma is kind of the fluid in the chloroplast, but we're looking at the thylakoid itself, and the membrane of that thylakoid is where this is going to happen. So you can see a little bit better here Solution is the stroma, and then the grana is the whole stack. Light is going to be very important because that's where the energy is going to come from. And there are a lot of different colors of light. The whole rainbow is called the visible spectrum. But we know plants, green light's very important. So different colors of light are going to give different energy for the plants. Pigments are going to absorb that light. And so we are going to look at different pigments and how they work. And so we often think in terms of like maybe art, pigments are the colors, but really the pigments are going to be what capture the light here in photosynthesis. So the chlorophylls are the two most important. We've got two main types, chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B. Chlorophyll A is the main guy. He is the most important one involved in capturing the light for photosynthesis. If he can't do his job, chlorophyll B is a backup, so he's going to help capture that light. So we've got like chlorophyll A is the A team doing most of the work, chlorophyll B team helping out just a little bit. But both of these are going to reflect green light, and so that's why leaves are going to look green on plants because they're giving off that green color. When those run out of energy, they can't do their job so well, they're all used up, then we revert to what are called carotenoids. They're a different kind of pigment, but they're going to reflect yellows and oranges and browns, what we're seeing this time of year. They don't do as good of a job, so the plants don't survive as well, just like we're seeing the fall colors and the leaves are starting to die. That's because they've only got the carotenoids at this point, most of them. So they're not doing as great a job. Now looking at converting that light energy to chemical energy. So light, and what, like we said earlier, ATP and NADPH are the chemical energy types that we're going to be dealing with. Photosystems. So far you should know a little bit about photosystems. We have two, and these are going to be where our chlorophylls and carotenoids are going to hang out, and that's where we're going to capture the light. The first one that they're going to come in contact with is actually photosystem 2, and then photosystem 1. So if we look here, in that membrane that we talked about, that layer that surrounds the thylakoid, so just like we had a cell membrane layer, this is the layer, and so this is going to be your photosystem. I mean, the green dots are going to be your pigments, so they're capturing the light and passing the light around. And you can think of electrons are actually the light that they're trying to carry around. Some of the molecules in there, you're going to have hydrogen in there that's going to help carry that light, and that's going to pass through those pigments. So this is going to be kind of our whole electron transport chain, the whole photosystem 1 and 2, processing the light. So again, first is photosystem 2, then we end up with photosystem 1, and ultimately we're going to make a little bit of energy. So let's break that down. First thing that's going to happen, the light's going to come in a form of light that's called a photon. That's just a specific amount of light. So light's coming in, and the green dots are our pigments, our chlorophyll A for the most part. They're going to capture that light, pass it around through, and then that electron that's coming from the light is going to get excited. Then that electron is going to be passed to what's called an electron carrier. And then that electron carrier is going to carry that electron through the membrane down the electron transport chain. It's going to start losing energy, but hydrogen ions are going to also start being produced along the way. One thing to notice, we know that my little black box has got to disappear here. There we go. Water is an important role. So the plants have to have water. They're going to have water inside. And so that water is ultimately going to break down into oxygen and hydrogen. That hydrogen is going to be used in the electron transport chain. And then the oxygen is just going to escape and be passed out. So we know that plants give off oxygen, and this is where it's going to come from, right here, this water breaking down. Once that electron is passed through the electron transport chain, more light's going to be caught in photosystem 1. The electrons are passed through photosystem 1, and then ultimately they're going to help with NAD plus binding with hydrogen and making NADPH, a form of energy that we're going to use in the Calvin cycle later. This is just talking more about the NAD plus combining with hydrogen and making NADPH. We want to watch this video, but we're going to have to pull it up on a different slide.
Plants provide us with food to eat and oxygen to breathe. They perform this amazing feat by the process of photosynthesis. Let's take a closer look. Photosynthesis requires carbon dioxide, which diffuses into the leaf through small pores and then enters the cells. Inside the cell, carbon dioxide diffuses into the chloroplasts, where photosynthesis takes place. Chloroplasts use energy from light to transform carbon dioxide and water into sugar and oxygen. Zooming into a chloroplast, we see these flattened membranous sacs called thylakoids. Here, light energy is converted to chemical energy in the first phase of photosynthesis, the light reactions. The two green structures you see here are photosystems, large complexes of proteins and chlorophyll that capture light energy. An electron transport chain connects the two photosystems. Notice the small mobile electron carriers that shuttle electrons from one large complex to another. Now let's take a closer look at the steps of the light reactions. The photosystem on the left absorbs light energy, exciting electrons that enter the electron transport chain. Electrons are replaced with electrons stripped from water, creating oxygen as a byproduct. The energized electrons flow down the electron transport chain, releasing energy that is used to pump hydrogen ions, the blue balls, into the thylakoid. In the photosystem on the right, light energy excites electrons, and this time the electrons are captured by an electron carrier molecule, NADPH. The high concentration of hydrogen ions inside the thylakoid powers ATP synthase, producing ATPs. The light reactions in the thylakoid have produced two energy products, ATP and NADPH, that will now power the production of sugar in the Calvin cycle. The Calvin cycle.
Okay, we're going to stop there and we'll come back to the Calvin cycle later. I always thought this was pretty funny and pretty true. All right, so going back to that water, when we start out with water, we have H2O. And so, again, inside the thylakoid, the water is going to be split apart. And it's going to split into hydrogen ions that will be used throughout the electron transport chain, electrons that will be used, and then oxygen that we said is going to be given off for us to breathe. So water gives us those three products. It's going to give the electrons, protons, which are the hydrogen, and oxygen that's released from the plant. Then we have chemiosmosis, and this is where our ATP is going to be made. So at this point, we have a DP, and we need to attach that additional phosphate. So we're going to transport hydrogens through the ATP synthase and attach the ADP to ATP. So remember, ADP was diphosphate two phosphates. So we need to attach that third to make ATP and have tri or three phosphates that we can then use in the Calvin cycle and use for energy throughout the whole process. And this is just kind of a bigger picture of what that ATP synthase protein is going to look like. So, like we said, the hydrogens are going to be transported through, help add those together, and make ATP.